All right. Well, good morning again, and welcome to a update about Enviroguard for sure, but really eCare as it pertains to commercial and institutional business. And right now, that really is the focus of eCare is helping our certified firms gain ground on commercial and institutional business. We're going to go through this very short presentation and then answer any questions that y'all have about eCare. And just so I can kind of set the tone for this, eCare is a collaboration between Enviroguard and ESG. ESG is a industrial hygiene company located in Greensboro, North Carolina, with a focus on indoor air quality, testing, protocol writing, clearance, things of that nature for everything related to mold, mycotoxins, allergens, and of course into other issues related to indoor environment. The way that we met was through a common customer, a contractor in the Winston-Salem area, and we found that we had a lot in common in terms of what we have heard over the years, where there have been points of work stoppage, contractors getting cut off, being fired from jobs, especially in the commercial and institutional sectors, due to not having information gathered properly and streamlined from the beginning. In fact, I was just getting off, as I was getting on here, I was getting off the phone with a contractor down in Georgia who began to lament the same sorts of things, that it's very frustrating to go into, let's say, a multifamily situation, and as you're getting involved in that job, the rush to begin work before adequate information is collected that might be their responsibility, then leads to potential liabilities for contractors. It leads to just problems that just come up and that shouldn't come up within the relationships. And so by creating a program whereby those types of clients are enrolled from the beginning, where the details of title assignment and responsibility, even when it comes to them, are assigned from the very beginning. They understand their role and responsibilities in the process. We are beginning to see the all of the downstream problems become alleviated by good planning and by having a great application that eCare is from the onset. Here's Dan right now. Um, and so before I've kind of given you my introduction to eCare and how Dan and I met. Let me turn it over to Dan, and he can also give you an introduction now from the IEP industrial hygiene side of things, as to his perspective and why eCare is equally valuable.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Hey, good morning, everybody. Yeah, so basically in a nutshell, from my perspective, I've worked with remediators for a long time, many different remediation companies, and I've seen companies come and go. I've seen remediation companies' relationships with large clients come and go, and retention being a big problem in a lot of areas, from retaining the right staff to retaining the right client. What I found a lot of times would happen is we would kind of show up to these big disasters and throw everything at it. The IEPs would throw a big protocol at it. The mold remediators throw a big quote at it. We'd go through a whole quote process. And it just seemed like in a lot of ways, there wasn't this alignment of all of the different people who were important to that process. A lot of times, maybe the quotes go through risk management and in a big building scenario or in a county building, and that risk management goal doesn't translate over to how the maintenance that from the actual building are going to try and carry out and assist in some of those options. And all of a sudden, as a remediator, you're on site with the head of maintenance. what y'all are doing ends up butting heads with what the risk manager wants, right? Things get in the way of good business, get in the way of good quotes, get in the way of being able to retain that client wholly and for a long period of time. Additionally, what I also saw is a lot of quote processes in these larger disaster response remediation situations where an underbidder will come in, someone who's maybe even never done mold remediation, doesn't have the equipment. They're going to either subcontract another remediation company, or they're going to, just try and learn it on the fly. And they come in with a quote that's 4 times lower than the other 3 people and win. And that's become a huge problem of mine personally with my clients, because when this happens to our client, somebody who's leading the bid process might understand that that's bad to see 2 or 3 bids that are consistent and then 1 bid that's way incredibly low. Something's off there. Are we being taken advantage of? Or is that low bidder who isn't even a remediator, they're just a construction company, are they going to come in and then do a bunch of change orders and get the price higher than what these other companies bid in the first place, which is what typically tends to happen. And so they might know that, but then as soon as that bid process goes to the stakeholders or the risk managers or some other person in that process, the board members, all of a sudden they say, you know what, let's try it. We want to go with the low quote. We'll start there. If it goes wrong, we'll switch to one of these other companies. And this process was destroying the ability for my clients to get valuable work done, and was getting in their way of being able to see the industry valuable at all. All of a sudden they started saying, we don't want to deal with remediators. And this became a big problem, because what are they going to do, right? They do need remediation. They need professional remediation. So that's where I kind of came into the fold, where I came into my relationship with Mark a little frustrated, to say the least. So I have all these problems, and I have all these clients, and they are upset, and they don't trust the industry anymore. And that's where we started beginning the roots of this. So ultimately that was the first big fix here, was the remediators that I know and the clients that I know, how do I get them on the same page so that they can stay together and have a multi-year relationship and work between the disasters as well? Because there's a lot of work that needs to be done in a lot of these buildings that isn't being escalated to remediation because it's not a disaster yet. So how do we get in front of that and keep the remediators on site doing more work? Isn't just huge, let's put a number on it, $100,000 and up disaster response, right? How can we get remediators doing more $15,000 jobs on a more routine basis, right? And that becomes one of the goals of this retention. And even if it's something that, let's say you only want to do $100,000 and up, well, that's fine too, because if you're a part of alignment with the company that is in eCare, then, maybe the process can help be managed by you anyways, or maybe there's something you can do to kind of support that process. The whole goal is working together with the client's goals, the remediator's goals, and bringing that together to make sure it makes sense, right?
Thanks for adding that, Dan. You're always so valuable in explaining that relationship. So I guess setting the table here for our experience so far is that we have now trained the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, the second largest campus in the state of North Carolina. That happened last week. We are going through kind of the onboarding process, and we're learning about this work with risk management and things like that right now to help streamline that going forward into the future. As we're doing that, we're beginning to work with 2 separate counties. One has gone ahead and approved moving forward with eCare. The second one, we're waiting for that approval. And where everything begins with them is education, right? Yes, managing each project through eCare is essential. But if we aren't stepping in to provide them with the structural and indoor air quality education from the beginning, they can't really begin to make good decisions about the dividing line between what it is that they do from a maintenance standpoint versus what is done from a remedial and restoration perspective. So that's essential to this, is almost showing them how, I don't want to say how difficult or tedious or complex the remediation and restoration process is, but there's a lot of that, right? That only comes with experience and expertise that's gained in time. And so by giving them a window into that in an initial day training session that runs the gamut of remediation, restoration, indoor air quality, and understanding of mold, or understanding of cross contamination concerns, and understanding of procedures, and principles of remediation, it helps them get to that point very rapidly where they know where to draw that line. I begin with that because it's also important for us to look at history, and I want to develop more of this as we go. I think Dan probably could share an equally valuable history from his perspective that he just was lamenting a few minutes ago. But I want to show you how we got here from Enviroguard's perspective as well, because y'all know me, but it's easy to lose track over time of how a chemical manufacturer got to a point where something like eCare could be at the heart of everything that we do going forward. And I will say that we have this definite intentional focus right now on commercial and institutional business, which is where many of our customers want to go. But that does not mean that eCare in the future won't come back to equally benefit residential customers as well. So if everyone is familiar with us, you know that we only sell our products factory direct, and that became our first step in entering the market. Was that we would be factory direct sales, support, and training, because we knew that the relationship is so important in the collaboration of, well, the call that I just got off a few minutes ago is all about a multifamily project coming up where we need to talk about where they've been, what their problems are, what procedures we can help them establish so that they don't, have these problems going forward. And I'm going to turn them straight toward eCare, of course. But yes, factory direct sales, support, and training so that there wasn't anybody in between us interrupting that flow of information was our first position in the marketplace. Then we brought our neutralization system over from our background as a manufacturer to manufacturer, specifically in the textile industry, with React Extract, where the React Extract system reduces job site labor time by 60 to 70% on average, prevents corrosion issues in the process, and helps our customers differentiate from their competition with a very unique system that, quite frankly, just outperforms what's already in the market. Then we introduced Deutreon, our EPA-registered chlorine dioxide products, to simplify the sanitization and deodorization processes with two options, both a dry and a wet application method that can equally mitigate spores, fungus, mycotoxins, allergens, and many more things through a 2013 proven study by the US EPA that allows us to go there and really do this. And what's been confounding but also exciting over time is helping our clients get an understanding of the difference between mitigating spore and mitigating fungus, right? The seed form versus the plant form of mold, and then how that can help them interface and successfully with clients who are of the sensitized population on the mycotoxin and allergen, again, helping differentiate from competitors. That brought us then into a training system of certification. And I always said that I would not do a certification system from the factory until we were more than just a commercial for our products. So initially we incorporated safety training and the relationship between safety equipment, our products, and the environment that people are working in, because there's a big difference between saying, well, we need a P100 for this, or we need an organic filter for this, versus knowing that you are going into not only a mold job, but a mold job with oxidizers, where then the compatibility between respiratory equipment, skin protection, etc., really plays a key role. So we nailed that down first with our manufacturer, which became companies like Lakeland, 3M, people like that. got over into the equipment efficiency side of things to make sure that we could scale from small to large size jobs easily with equal control. And then we constructed protocols that were based upon procedures, based upon soil load issues, as well as aesthetic issues that are both necessary for a happy customer. And then we leveled our pricing so that whether a customer was ordering a case of something or they were ordering a pallet of something, they wouldn't have variables to contend with when it came to profitability. All right. So then that led us to focusing on the set sales process, because we saw a lot of your customers were tire kickers who were using your information against you, right? You'd provide them with information, a quote, and maybe more that then they would use against you with your competitors, or use to negotiate against you in the end. You're going to negotiate against your own estimates and things like that. So we used the set sales process to differentiate from competitors by implementing a consultative approach to sales. And by way of going from interview to clarity for the day's visit to the accomplished list, and then into the inspection, it allowed for that rapport building, creating the level of trust that you need to really differentiate yourself as the go-to expert consultatively in that relationship. We moved from that then into the mold severity indexing system, which has become severity indexing overall, but it gave us a way of simplifying standards of condition 1 and 2 in a much more easily communicated way, in educating customers, in communicating from the inspection through job completion with your team, and for creating a precise way of doing estimating for profit assurance. And then, of course, that got us to the Enviroguard creative side of things, where we started making print and digital assets. And you're seeing a couple brand new ones right now that we're about to finish up on the fire and water side of things, featuring the process, but in a very simplified way to help differentiate you from your competitors again, so that your customer could find greater value in your service than just maybe what your competition is unable or unclear in communicating. We've done that now with our print materials. Now we've moved into full scale 30-second up to 1-minute production on the video side of things as well. And then finally, we're here with ESG. And Dan, I'll let you explain, of course, where ESG comes in, because this really is what led to eCare itself.
Thanks, Mark. So basically, my company that I run, and it's my family company. So my dad founded it as an Environmental Solutions Group. We started in 2002, before what most people consider the big mold gold rush, and I find that to be important, because we started with a more comprehensive vantage point of what does make people sick inside their buildings, right? And mold is one of the things, but we started with a root cause type of focus. How do we find and solve issues, right? Rather than how do we just test for mold, right? And we've stayed in that direction and enhanced it ever since then, to the point where in North Carolina, other testing and consulting companies out here just aren't anywhere close to the level of technicality and care that we bring to our clients. So I guess direct comparisons would be, we had a client reach out to us, a remediator, and they said, hey, we've got this client, big warehouse where they're doing manufacturing of electronics and sensitive kind of robotic equipment, and we need you to come in there and work with the client to do some testing, write us a technical protocol, let us know it's condition 2 and 3, so that we can come in and assign and give them a quote. They've got an OSHA complaint, so it's really kind of careful. They need it done right away. So we got in touch with the client. We gave them a quote. We waited for the next day to hear back. And when I called them, they said, oh, we had another company come in early this morning and take care of it. And I'm like, just so you know, we're probably a little bit different than the other company you brought in. And, if they met your goals, then that's great. But what you probably need is, need to know the source of the moisture. You need to know condition 2 and 3 areas. So we waited, and the remediator got the report from the other company. And sure enough, it was just results of samples right from the lab, right? No analysis, nothing to guide the remediator, nothing to put a quote off of. And so this is what I see from my vantage point a lot. And unfortunately, there tends to be a lot of, it's a black box of IEPs and industrial hygienists and consultants, where a lot of people kind of try and make up their own rules. A lot of consultants and IEPs end up being a little bit argumentative towards each other because, one's doing it one way, one's doing it the other way type of deal. Well, we've made it our goal over the course of time for, first of all, industry alignment. I show up at the national conferences. I present at the national conferences. I know the top people that are out here doing this nationally, and I make sure that we're in line with them so that outside of North Carolina, we've got a national alignment with the standards and with the best practices. That's thing number one. So industry alignment is really important. And you can use that in court too. That's actually a defensible position, right? Secondly, we do a lot of legal stuff. So we get called directly by lawyers to come and do expert witnessing. We back up our remediators. We help them in court. We help them protect them from people suing them for, there's mold coming back following a PRV type stuff, right? Or, cross-contamination, that type of stuff. So we've been taking on court cases since 2006 and working from that spectrum. So I have a really good background in navigating the legal portion as well, how to protect clients, how to protect remediators, how to wiggle through that gray area in court. And basically, with all this kind of experience and background and working on another $1 million mold remediation job and another one, and seeing these failures at each of these points that I described earlier, it became very frustrating for me. I feel like there was just so much more that could be done to help out remediators and help out clients and bring this together. And so, that's where my company ESG, is the other E of eCare, right? We have a team that's out there right now testing buildings, writing protocols, right? And we do that. But I don't expect to do that on a grand scale. I'm not trying to grow ESG into a multi-state, large industrial hygiene company. I like my quality control. I like my focus here in North Carolina. But with eCare, there's a bigger vision here that speaks right back to ESG and my history, which is how do we help people outside of North Carolina and across the entire U.S. bring this together, build better retention, have a better solution and a better program for staying involved clients to remediator. And so that's where really kind of my background meets my goals finally comes together. And like I said, when I met Mark and the things that he's talking about, just so you know, from a an expert standpoint, when he talks about his chemical neutralization of products and his processes, they're great. Okay. Like his talk is spot on with the standards. It works. I believe it, and it holds up. So I think that's also really important because I've met a lot of, let me put it this way, before Mark, every chemical manufacturer or chemical salesperson that I've met didn't understand the industry. I don't think I've told you that, Mark. They just didn't understand it, right? So they would come in and say, oh, we have this magic chemical that you can just spray on mold. It makes it disappear. You don't even need to do HEPA vacuuming. You don't even need to do damp wiping. You can just spray it, and different claims like that over time where it's just, I'm like, that does, first of all, if that did exist, which I don't think is in the realm of physics, did exist and it did work, it doesn't align with the standard anyway. So it won't hold up in court. So, what Mark has done is he's taken best practices and aligned it with best chemicals and processes and put it all together in a package. And that's why when I met Mark and I saw him doing the training and I heard about what he was doing, I was like, he's figured out the whole other side of it. He's made remediation quicker, better, and more effective. And he's able to train that. So I'm like, if I take my position and I say, why don't we work from the ground up to train maintenance, to train the feet on the ground within the big campuses and give them some support. And then let's work with remediators to do the same thing. And let's align these goals. From my position, I can oversee it as a consultant, right? I can make sure all the pieces come together. I can make sure the liabilities in control. I can make sure the certifications are all there, right? And the things that kind of keep us all protected. And Mark can bring in his pieces of making sure the training's really good, the processes are really good. And then all of a sudden we do have this full circular system, right? So yeah, that's how ESG ultimately kind of backs me up to be able to do this.
And so I think if you also kind of read between the lines there, we want to work with your trusted industrial hygiene firms to bring them into this because they already have the relationships with the hospitals, with the universities and campuses, the municipalities, the prison systems, and all these other areas where this is so important. So what we're gonna talk about next steps in a few minutes here, but we want to mention that this, as Dan said, he's not looking to grow ESG beyond the Carolinas. We are going to be seeking those relationships in Alabama, in Delaware, in Florida, to make sure that we have what did you just call it, Dan? Um, oh, kind of like a level platform, right?
Yeah.
Where we see eye to eye on
Alignment.
all
Yeah.
these things. Alignment,
Exactly.
yes.
Exactly. And I think too, that's the big thing as well. Like, I'm not out there to go battle and argue other IEPs and consultants, right? Like, that's never been my goal. That's why I'm part of the associations and the conferences. I like meeting people, and I like figuring out and coming up with solutions, right? And so that's where there should be this, just like I think the remediator should have better relationships with their campuses or with their big larger buildings. That's more multi visits a year than just disaster response. In the same way, I think that the IEPs and the consultants that understand this industry, because there's a lot that don't, we need to be on the same page as well. So if you have good IEPs and people you trust, like, that's great. We want more of that, right? We want that alignment, and we want to work with that rather than kind of say, oh, we have certain rules or things that you have to follow. And I know that that's probably, if you talk to one of your IEPs, that's probably going to be their biggest concern. Is eCare going to make me do something? And the answer is no. I mean, we want to work with you to figure out what you're doing, how you're assisting your client, and how we better support that.
So that brings us to eCare itself, where we want to talk about the kind of clients from the get-go who we're going to serve and who we're going to help you serve and align with. And that would include the IEPs and hygienists, as we just mentioned, the institutions and municipalities, the builders and contractors, including both residential and multifamily commercial builders, the property managers, and investors and developers. At all levels, these people tend to interface with one another. But this is who we are building. Let's just call it eCare 1.0 to service. As we go a little bit deeper in the actual services themselves, then we begin seeing that we've already spoken about the importance of training and alignment, contractor vetting, right? One of the things that we got to just in last week's conversation, and because I've seen so many bad examples of this being out and about across the United States, was we recommended, hey, and when you are getting ready to hire your certified firm to come in, get to know them, go to their facility, see how they separate out all inbound dirty equipment from jobs, and how they clean and sanitize that equipment before it gets wrapped and goes over to the clean side of the house for storage and then of course use again, so that you can really understand what's so important about selecting the right contractor for the job, and how beneficial even just that simple thing really is. Go to the facility. Internal process documentation, which we'll get to here in a second, indoor air quality monitoring, compliance assurance, and preventative strategies. So when we look at this, Dan, do you mind if I pull up a sheet for everybody here? I'm sorry, a form?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay. Let me just go ahead over here. And I think maybe the one that could be most helpful, and I'll have to reshare my screen with everybody, would be the one that begins with the environmental concern and initial response form. Is that probably about right?
Um, let's see where. Yeah, it should be on the portal. Probably the best one would be the mold and moisture response one.
Okay.
Um, it starts with environmental concern form.
Okay. Hold on a second. Let me just do this and reshare.
Yeah, so what's pretty nice about what we've done with these forms is we've made them not only fillable, but they're actionable. So they can speak back to other functions. They can prompt different people to get involved. They can send emails, even text messages, depending on what's filled out in here. So we can really make sure that if something gets typed in that does involve remediation or even brings it into the fold, that you all get known of that right away.
And what you're not seeing here, and what is our next step, we're about to launch portals for each of our customers where they can have access to all of these sorts of things. So think of that as like a user basis when we're talking about this. But for right now, we're just showing you the forms that will be a part of those portals. All right, so here is the environmental concern initial response, right, where you're getting the technician's name, all the contact information, date of the inspection, time of the inspection, location, and this is obviously built toward institutions, right? So here you're going to see a room name or description, building name, building address, location of concern, concern type, and a lot of these are just pull down menus. Describe it. When was it first noticed? Right? Is it a recurring issue or not? Or maybe you're unsure about that. And this is your client filling out all of this information. And then they're uploading pictures. And then the question is, mold and moisture assessment ready to begin? Yes. Now they're moving on to the next step. Now they're in the mold and moisture inspection itself, where that may have been assigned to a different team member. Now that information is going in. They're going through things like visual observations, severity indexing. Of course, that probably looks familiar to everybody. Now, we will have two forms of this, one for structural and one for, let's call it living workspaces, right, where you'll see surfaces that are of MSI 1 through 5, but on like painted drywall, for example. So, but everything is described as we've talked about in training down below, where MSI 1 is characterized by elevated mold spores, but no visible sign of growth or staining, right? And then, of course, notes for everything, all your measurements. Okay. Are there any possible wet building materials? All your measurements for floor, wall, and ceiling surfaces here. Of course, uploads of your readings. Oops. And then select impacted building components, right? Again, kind of rinsing and repeating there. And then here, this is a pull down of, next step recommendations. I had selected remediation required, and then maybe a date of follow-up on that, and then assignment to either the indoor air quality coordinator, assessor, remediator, or other. Okay, this all builds back into EPA standards. See, it's necessary for all of these institutions to actually be on a program. Now, until this point, there wasn't a program developed that they could be on. So we're simply meeting the specifications and standards of EPA by putting this program together for them in the first place. Now we're assigning titles. So someone within each of those clients will be an indoor air quality coordinator assigned with us from the very beginning of the relationship, so that that information is standardized when it comes over to you. It'll be signed off on, and then maybe, let's say, remediation is ready to begin. Now they'll go into the remediation steps, and this is where it begins to get passed over to you, right? So Dan, maybe you can explain this to us.
Yeah, that's great. So basically what we built out here, and this is, we kind of started with doing what UNC Charlotte was looking at trying to have done here to assist them, at first. And this is where a lot of this retention thing becomes a problem, right? If all of a sudden, every time UNC Charlotte has a little bit of mold growth on their air supply vents, and it's not systemic, and it's not in the room, it's not in the ducts, it's just from condensation on 5 of their supply vents. If they're going to call a remediator in to quote them on that and do that, first of all, it's very slow. Second of all, it's very expensive, and the maintenance sees that, and the budget people see that, and all of a sudden that builds to this distrust for remediation, right? Simple things that they say, the maintenance says, I could have just cleaned that with bleach, right? Why are we paying $1,000 for remediation of it? Well, bleach isn't the solution either, right? So instead, what this does is it helps say, okay, if you do have a low severity thing like growth on something, and we, details about the scope selection in here. So it says, no hidden water damage, minimal occupant risk, and an area of less than 2 square feet, something that's very manageable by maintenance that are trained, then they can do this themselves, potentially with the correct assistance, forms, pre-training, and equipment, right? So we say, hey, this, for UNC Charlotte, that was their whole goal. They wanted to be able to do some of this minimal stuff in-house, right? The next step would be, though, is if they switch to one of these other ones like Scope B, now we get into multiple areas, 2 to 10 square feet of mold, contents are affected, maybe there's some hidden moisture or water damage. Okay, now things split off if they go here. Is there some of this that can be started by them, or at what point does it switch immediately over into third-party remediation? And we help them build that line based on some of their goals and some of their objectives and their training and their staff and their equipment, right? So most places, I would say, won't be able to do a whole lot of Scope B, maybe some of it, right? But we give them that decision tree when they click it so that it can help prompt it to the right next person. Now, Scope C, if they click that, it just immediately sends the remediator a message.
Yeah, right.
And that's for, on here for UNC Charlotte, anything over 10 square feet, significant water intrusion, high spores, contaminated contents, the stuff that immediately gets and escalated to a needed profession certified remediator, right? So this is that whole thing where if we can empower, a university system that has 20 buildings to be able to do some of this minimal, low severity stuff themselves and trust an accurate and real trained process instead of maintenance just running around bleach rags, then when they see a Scope B, they're going to think, they're going to know, I can't do that. And they're going to know why. And then they're going to say, let's get the remediators for all of our Scope Bs, which currently are just hidden right now, right? We all know this. In the big buildings, you get called for Scope Cs, very little Scope Bs, because the remediators can potentially Band-Aid hide that. They can repaint the walls. They can spray their bleach. They can move people around to try and make people report it less, right? That's what they do typically with untrained maintenance staff when they hit that Scope B. So what this does is it brings those back over to the remediator.
So I'm just going to go on to the next here where we get to the post-remediation evaluation. Dan, would you walk us through this one as well?
Right. So basically, this is great. What this does is this is built from ICRC PRE guidance, right? So PRE is post-remediation evaluation, which the S520 says is an internal process that can be done by the remediator themselves. By the standard, it says that post-remediation verification is to verify it has to be a different party than whoever performed it, just as different, right? So what this does is it takes that guidance and it breaks it down into actual check boxes and a form that can be filled out that aligns completely with the objectives of the standard. So basically, we all know that if to complete a mold remediation job, you don't want it to smell like mold, right? You want it to be dry. You want it to be clean looking. And you want the issue to be resolved, right? The original issue that caused it, right? So this walks you through that to make sure all of those objectives are hit. Part of the reason why this is really great is because all the remediators that I work with, and a lot of times it's not their fault, but due to their team having this low retention, and turnover, they might have a new supervisor or somebody who comes out there and they call our company to come do a PRV, and we show up and the walls are still wet, soaked, right? And they say, well, we clean the mold. And we say, well, this isn't technically resolved. And so having forms like this helps us align those goals before it comes time to say, we're done. Because by the time you're giving the client, you say, oh, we're going to be done on Friday. And then all of a sudden you say, actually, there's a holdup. It's not going to be Friday. It's going to be a week later. That causes big client concerns. Besides distrust, it just throws them for a loop. So what this does is it helps align those goals early on, so that when you get to that point where you're telling the client the end date, you've got confidence that you've done everything possible to align it with that PRV standard. So yeah, relative humidity, temperature, we got picture areas. And then ultimately, did you document things correctly? Were there photos taken? Were there moisture readings recorded? Relative humidity? If samples were collected, is there details in the chain of custody? And so on and so forth. One of the things that we're looking towards too is empowering remediators and people to be able to do some in-house sampling, right? Now, we know that in our industry, there are lots of remediators out there doing sampling kind of secretly, right? They don't really promote it, but when they're talking to clients, they'll say, oh yeah, we can run a quick sample, right? And they'll kind of use it as a screening process. I think using sampling as a screening process as a remediator is a great tool, and I don't think it needs to be hidden. I think instead it just needs to be trained and done properly, right? And that way you can speak with more confidence as to the sample you collected, right? So that's kind of what we're allowing to try and train into here is, well, if you do want to do an air sample, it doesn't count as a verification because you collected it yourself, but we can teach you how to do it in a way where the documentation is perfect so that it's hard to poke a hole in it. And that's a much further level of help that you can get before you have to say, we need a third party to come in and verify this, right? Also, it helps maintain, once again, this alignment where there's a lot of sampling companies out there that come in that, like the situation I described, that maybe they're, we've seen home inspectors and pest management companies get into mold air sampling. I'm like, it's, so let me put it this way. For me to do a mold sample correctly, okay, first of all, it's $1,000 pump. That's what we use. And I don't want to use something lower than that because it's variable. It's an air pump. It has to be perfect. I'm collecting 25 liters of air or something like that. It has to be the perfect defined amount of air. If my pump's a little bit off and collects 30 liters or 20 liters instead of 25, my whole measurement's way, way wrong by a large margin, right? 20 liters of air versus 25, that's like a 10% difference, right? So now take 10% and add or subtract from my final spore count. It's a big deal, right? A 100 count of Stachybotrys in the air versus a 0 count of Stachybotrys in the air is a big deal, right? So like this sampling process has to be done with a form of carefulness and accuracy, which a lot of sampling companies are not doing. We see our competitors out there. I call them competitors. Like, once again, they're not doing similar things, but they're coming out there with low quality pumps, dirty technicians, and they're coming in to try and pass remediator PRVs. And of course there's going to be a problem because their equipment sucks and they're not trained to do it in a way that actually gives a real accurate result. If you all know that and know that process better, you can control and keep those people out from reprimanding you when they're actually the ones doing a bad job. And hopefully you don't run across that a whole lot, but I know that even if you have your preferred IEPs that you work with, your jobs are going to be cross-checked by other ones that you don't know, right? And the homeowners are sometimes going to call in their brother who has an air sampling pump, and sometimes the clients are going to put out a Petri dish from Lowe's, right? All these different things we've seen, and you need to know how to navigate that a little bit better too.
So that then brings us to some things that we've run up against recently, and these questions have been kind of coming up the entire time. Like, is this going to be exclusive? And the metrics that we found is that there has to be a level of exclusivity. There also has to be a level of availability to this, because when we get into job sizes that are $50,000 or more, I believe is at least what we've run into recently, then it's got to go out to bid. Well, now there's this balancing act, right? Because it has to go out to bid to the right people, but it can't. And so those bids have to be legit, right? They have to be right. Um, um, they have to represent the right services. And we shouldn't see these low bids come in anymore if we're aligned correctly with the institutions and the entire, everyone else who we're talking about here. Now, the right contractors will be lined up to do this. And what that's going to require is having independent restorers, some franchise restorers, waterproofers, roofers, plumbers, electricians, HVAC contractors available, because they have to get at least 3 bids on these jobs, like I said, that are larger than $50,000. So this is a must. And so when these questions have come to us in the past, we've been like, yes, there's going to be this level of exclusivity, but we couldn't define what that is yet. Now we have a way of defining that is beneficial. Although, like, this is new information, you're seeing this for the first time, and the reasons why behind this. What we are, of course, asking for, at least from Enviroguard's standpoint, and we're going to be working, like we said, with the IEPs as well, to make sure that if it's in the state of Delaware, for example, and you're working with your IEP there, that maybe the pumps that go into these jobs are always coming from their shop, that they're always calibrated perfectly. All of these standards exist so that you are working with the right people consistently, time and time again. And that also involves a level of exclusivity by and between all of us for this to operate with a high level of quality control and predictability. So we will be updating our license to each of our certified firms to reflect 100% Enviroguard and Dutreon use, bar none, and that we are the preferred equipment and PPE vendor, even if that means us going out and securing some new relationships. And all of that will become available through the eCare platform, so that we've got one simple way of providing the testing equipment, the chemicals, drying equipment, et cetera, that you may need on into the future. But this really just, pulls everything together in alignment for all of us. So, we know that there's going to be questions, and we're happy to answer, questions with you here today, but other questions are going to come up. So we have recorded this so that you can go back and listen to it, share it with your team. We can have some future discussions. If I were to say, what is the next step? My suggestion would be, if you already have relationships that you are struggling with and that you'd like to grow at this institutional and commercial level, let's begin working on those together and bring them into eCare and start with education. If you are looking to begin bolstering your relationship with IEPs and industrial hygiene firms, let's work together to provide a discovery call to those, narrow it down to the industrial hygiene firm that you really want to focus with and that represents the most opportunity and professionalism in your neck of the woods. And let's work on this thing and build it out together. So with that, I'd like to open up the floor to some questions. And Dan, while we're waiting on any questions that might arise, is there anything that you want to add to that for us?
No, I think that sounds great. Ultimately, yeah, it's if there's a one opportunity we've seen from our clients to really work on this alignment and get feet on the ground, it's if you know of or are involved in a big remediation that is underway or potentially going to be underway, it's going to have all these components involved, right? Really anything, I don't even know, maybe $15,000 and up, right? Now you get building owners, stakeholders, other people involved. And that's the alignment thing here is so key for that process to move smoothly for you as a remediator. So those are good ones for us to start with, and would have worked for our other clients is, we're in a big courthouse project right now where we're working for the county, but we've got the remediator aligned as well. So we're trying to train them both in the class at the same time so that not only can they speak the same language between the county and the remediator, but it just builds it in deeper. The relationships will go deeper. It will all happen at the same time. And then as we actually begin trying to remediate this 2-level courthouse, there's that alignment that allows us pass off between what facilities can do and what the remediators can do. And the remediators in this situation and the county both love the idea, and they're working together with eCare to try and make this as smooth of a ride possible for the courthouse and for the county, because it could go to the news and it could blow up into a huge situation. And so we found situations like that to be really good to kind of enter this into, where we immediately start with this alignment. So if you have anything like that, those are probably the ones to be thinking about. It doesn't have to be a giant courthouse, but like I said, anything really where you get these multiple parties involved.
This is eCare 1.0, like I was saying, and I will add this just to kind of tease the future of eCare. We will be at a point relatively soon where preparedness for storms and everything else will be a part of the eCare system, where your clients will know in advance, based upon geofencing and things like that, what to expect, and be able to notify you of their need for preparation for storms, storm surge, things of that nature as well. So this is going to go beyond even what we've spoken about today, and those relationships are already in place. We're already having meetings on the preparedness side of things. And eventually, when this translates from the commercial institutional side down into the residential side, where it becomes available nationwide to all form of customers, it is going to be a very significant, and we believe, household brand that is used by all. Okay, well, if there aren't any questions, apparently we've done a decent enough job of providing information today. Let's connect, right? Let's set up a meeting outside of this to answer maybe any specific questions that you have that just pertain to your company, or if you're ready to kind of say, let's take the next step of getting this moving along. Let's take that next step by just having a conversation outside of this, and beginning to look at opportunities that are upcoming, clients that you'd like to work with, and keep the ball rolling, right? A meeting's not a very good meeting if you don't book one to the next and keep things moving along and in your sights. So that ball's in your court, and we look forward to hearing from you as to taking those next steps. But I appreciate everybody being here today. Dan, thank you as always for your professionalism and your knowledge.
Thanks, Mark. And yeah, thanks everybody for being here. We've got open ears, and we're open to not only kind of working with you on this, but just hearing you out too. How can what we've talked about, think about the issues and the solutions. How can this be helpful to you, and help that retention, help grow your clients? So thanks, y'all.
Here.